It's time for the biggest story of the day. This is what made the cut with JJ and Alex on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
This portion of the program brought to you by Trajan Wealth, TRAJAN Wealth.com. That's Trajan Wealth for all your trusted local needs in retirement. Jason Scheer covers Arizona for Wildcat Authority. We talked about football. We talked about basketball. Jason, welcome back to the program, man.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, I kind of set it up here. If I'm somebody watching this game tonight, Arizona is not liking the last two games that they played. Very, very good opponents. The Big 12 is deep, man, and it's and Arizona is one of the best teams in the country. They've proven it all year long. BYU comes in. They won on that floor last year. All these things, and no Richie Saunders for BYU. This all adds up to a Arizona team that's going to have a massive chip on their shoulder, and they want to take it to BYU.
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree, and it's not just what happened last year. I mean, the two losses, like you mentioned, players, and I definitely think, especially with Houston coming up on Saturday, that Arizona's kind of entering this game, with a don't forget about us type of mentality. So I definitely think there's a little bit of a chip on their shoulder and the feeling that maybe, even though they know they're really good, that there's kind of still something to prove as, people wonder, I don't want to say a fluke, but if people wonder that maybe they're not as good as was previously thought.
Arizona coming into this game with a little bit of adversity. A couple of losses. Koa Pete out with a lower leg injury. I think there's all the teams in the country would love to have Arizona's adversity, but how's the team handling this? I guess you call it a little bit of a blip on their radar.
Yeah, I mean, they're handling it well. I think Tommy Lloyd has the right approach where, everyone was talking about could Arizona run the table and all that, and Tommy Lloyd is one game at a time, and he never talked publicly about running the table as a possibility, and there were even a few times where he said, look, we're going to lose a game or two here, guys. And after the loss to Kansas, he said, I'll be blunt, we're probably going to lose a couple more. Like, the Big 12 is it's a really good conference, and it's hard to win. And so I think they have the right mentality. I mean, Koa Pete didn't play the second half against Texas Tech, and they lost that game. And they went from, undefeated to two losses in a row. So I think we'll find out a lot tonight. But generally speaking, Tommy Lloyd's teams have handled adversity pretty well.
This game tonight, BYU coming into town, and obviously with one of their big three, as they're referred to, and it's not just big three for BYU. It was a massive three. They have quite a bit of a falling off from the points perspective after if those three guys aren't hitting with AJ DeBonsa, Richie Saunders, and Rob Wright. And now with one of them out of the equation, that makes it a little bit easier. I guess I could say easier in quotes for somebody to get men on AJ DeBonsa to make sure you can bottle up Rob Wright, because he can go off for 30. He's done it a couple times this year, and certainly they're going to feel that type of a pressure. What is Arizona's approach to, hey, this is one of the best players in the country? Obviously, we played him before. They had a closer game than we probably wanted by the end of that one against BYU at the Marriott Center. How are they going to attack knowing that those two guys are there and Richie's out?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, twofold. Number one, you got to make sure AJ doesn't completely go off. And the way Arizona did that in the first game as well, he got his points. It was inefficient, and they did it by throwing a lot of different looks at him. I think four different players guarded him that game. I expect something similar with different looks. And then it's a matter of not letting the other guys get going. Because, I mean, if DeBansa and Robert Wright drop 20 points each, or, even 25 points each, there's still other guys, right? And so it'll be interesting to see if it changes anything. I mean, they played Saunders and Wright straight up, and DeBansa was the one that they gave attention to. Do they kind of switch it and, let DeBansa kind of get his and maybe switch the focus to Wright? It'll be interesting, but the one thing I can guarantee is that while Arizona's a straight man-to-man type of team, they're going to throw different guys at DeBansa, and there's going to be 3 or 4 different players that guard him and have kind of different defensive styles, whether it's a Waka with his physicality or Yvonne with his versatility. They're going to try to give DeBansa a bunch of different looks from different angles and see if they can at least make, his 25 points or whatever he scores inefficient.
Looking at the Arizona roster, one of the most impressive things to me in that first matchup against BYU was Arizona's depth. I mean, you're rolling out with 7 guys that average more than 20 minutes a game. Not many teams in the league can say that, and obviously that contributes to their success. Can you take us through Tommy Lloyd's roster building? Because you see a lot of teams in this league, and many of the great teams in the country are top heavy because it's so hard to have this many good guys. How did he build such depth on this roster?
Yeah, the one consistent thing he has, especially with the transfer portal, is he's not going to break the bank for one player. He won't do it. And even though they have a pretty solid NIL, there's recruits, whether it's portal or high school, that price themselves out right away. Where if they go with a certain amount, Tommy Lloyd will just say, I'm not doing it. That's not how we approach it. And obviously, guys like Braden Burries and Koa Pete weren't for free, but it's a situation where it's an entire roster. He looks very hard at the entire roster, and he's not going to go all out for one star player and build around that. He'd rather have balanced teams, and that's something even with, Caleb Love was really good last year, but there's balance on that team. This year it's Koa, Burries, Bradley. It's what he views to be important, and so he'd rather have guys that maybe play roles off the bench that maybe aren't superstars, but they're good at specific things, as opposed to having one superstar and just a bunch of guys. He'd rather have balance with the starting lineup and then be able to bring guys off the bench that are able to do certain jobs.
One of the great things that Arizona does well is they play pretty darn good defense. They win every game almost by 20 points. It's I think top 5 or top 7 in the country in terms of like that point differential. If this one goes exactly how Tommy Lloyd wants to plan this one out, if it feels a little bit like a mismatch at the center because and Keba Keita hasn't been playing super well, but giving up 7 inches to the 7-foot. To the 7'2" center from Arizona, I'm always like, that's a big disparity. But those guys absolutely were punching the heck out of each other in game one. It was kind of fun to watch.
I love that matchup. For all the attention that the superstars get with the Bansa and Wright and Burries and all that matchup's so fun to watch because they beat the heck out of each other. I mean, it's physical. They're pushing each other. They're fighting for rebounds. It's a great matchup. I think Krivas is one of the best defensive centers in the country. He makes Arizona's defense go. When he's on the bench, there's generally a big drop-off if he's in foul trouble or whatever it may be. I could see both teams kind of going at the opposing center. I mean, if Keita's on the bench, BYU's not going to be as big, obviously, or as physical. And then if Krivas is on the bench, all of a sudden, Arizona's depth is almost non-existent now with Pete and Dwayne Aristode out as well for tonight. So that matchup might be it is one of the keys to the game. And if people watch it closely, they'll see two guys just going at it in the post, and it's fun to watch.
AJ DeBonsa playing on the road at Arizona. I think there's going to be a lot of people around the country that want to see how he handles that and watches that. But it reminds me of just how many great players there are in this conference, and you follow it closely. You get to see all these guys. We unfortunately saw one go down with JT Toppin last night with the ACL. Who's the best? Who's going to be the player of the year this year in the Big 12? I think it's really tough because there's so many great players.
I would have said, if you would have asked me this 48 hours ago, I would have said Toppin.
Exactly.
Right?
That's why I bring it up, right? Now it's wide open again.
Yeah, it's wide open again. I mean, Toppin killed Arizona. He was on fire, and now I don't think you can give it to him. He's going to be missing the last 6 games, and so. Josh Jefferson on Iowa State comes to mind. To me, it's probably between AJ and Josh Jefferson. Those are the two guys that I would keep an eye on. But I love Kingston Flemings too. And you said it, this conference is just it's the amount of talent individually as a team. It has just been so fun to watch, and there's so many different guys that I could point to as being some of the best at their position in the country. Peterson doesn't play enough. Or else I think that he would be in there. But right now, I would say AJ and Joshua Jefferson are probably the two that I have an eye on for the player of the year.
I'm going to bring up some football because one of the guys that we really like in this conference as a coach is Brent Brennan, and he just got extended. That was one of the most wild years for Arizona because they were so good, and yet they certainly turned a massive corner. What's Brent Brennan done and don't think that it missed on Wildcat fans that Arizona State was behind them in the standings at the very end of the season. But I want to know what your thoughts are on keeping Brent Brennan at that program through 2030, and they also extended his coordinators as well.
Yeah, it's a big deal when the relatively new athletic director. I don't want to say she's a football AD, but she recognizes the value in football, and so when the season ended. And Arizona doesn't have 9-win, 10-win seasons. It doesn't happen here very often at all. So the key was Brennan, and Brennan made sure that the coordinators came along too. I mean, the Arizona defense was fantastic this past season. The offense was solid, and Seth Dagey, this is his first year as a Power 4 coordinator, so he was kind of learning. But, Noah Fifita in his career at Arizona had never had an offensive coordinator for consecutive years. And so it was vital that they bring back the offensive coordinator. And, I like it. I mean, I think Brennan's biggest mistake, and he would tell you the same, is that he kind of gave in to making everyone happy in that first year. And there were players that didn't necessarily fit the culture. And, we talked about NIL spending with basketball. He wasn't balanced. He made sure certain guys were happy and other guys didn't really, he didn't really build the entire roster. This past year, it was a different, approach. And even with next year's roster, it's a different approach. And so I think you'll see balance and more depth at each position, especially on the defensive side of the ball. But having consistency in a coach more than 2 or 3 years for Arizona football is something that doesn't happen often. And so stability, I think, is the key word around the AD and the football program, and that's what the extensions and the raises did.
Coming off a 9-win season and tying for 4th in a very, very good conference, and having Noah Fifita back, how do the Wildcats build on that, and what are the expectations for this team? Way too early, but what are their expectations in 2026?
Yeah, I mean, the schedule is a little harder than it was this past year, but they missed Utah, they missed Texas Tech, they get both of those this upcoming year. But expectations they've been raised, they just have, and that's what happens when you're successful around Arizona. But they brought back Noah Fifita, but they lost some guys. They on the defensive side of the ball, their group of safeties was as good as anyone in the country. They lost all of them, so they had to replace that in the portal. And a lot of it's going to come down to how good that secondary is. If that secondary can be anywhere close to last year, Arizona's defense is going to be good. If not, it'll take a step back. And offensively, they lost some of their offensive linemen, and the game's won in the trenches. So I think there's a lot of questions, but they've shown that they scout the transfer portal really well and high school really well. And a lot of these guys that they got in the transfer portal for last season were successful. So while there's questions, if you were to ask the coaches even to give you a straight up honest answer, they would tell you that they're optimistic about next year.
As you watch this Arizona program go into the transfer portal, and I don't know how much success, it's such a battle, and the throwing the money part at it, it's one thing to have an athletic director who's behind it, but from a donor standpoint, what's the money situation for Arizona? Do they have some pretty high-level folks who've swooped in and said, hey, man, count on us? Or how is that situation? Because that matters now as much as anything else, it feels like, in college football.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's average. It's probably middle of the conference. I mean, look, no one's going to go out and spend Texas Tech money, right? It's just not, and they're not going to reach the BYU levels or anything like that. But they can compete. And I think that, Brent Brennan came from San Jose State, where there's no money at all, and you have to be able to evaluate. And I think the best way at Arizona to win is the ability to evaluate and fill needs and find diamonds in the rough and things like that. I think you have to. And, and then retention. And Arizona spent a lot of their money on retention and making sure the younger players that they like came back, maybe more so than the transfer portal guys. And it's important. And, there may be some growing pains along the way, but that's their strategy. Their strategy is to retain the best players on the roster and see them grow within the program and kind of add pieces from there. And we'll find out a lot more this year about how that strategy works. But I would say it's probably average NIL right now.
Back to basketball before we cut you loose. We can look forward and ahead. Obviously, Arizona's not looking past BYU, but that game against Houston, number 4 versus number 2, and obviously I think Arizona's the best team in the country right now, so it feels like a 1 versus 2 type matchup. How incredible is that game going to be coming up this weekend?
Yeah, I wish Arizona was healthy. I really, but I think Koa Pete, would play a large role in that game. Going to Houston, where they basically don't lose in Big 12 play, and being down a starter and a 6-man basically is really tough. But it's a fun game. I think Houston is the type of team where when you play them, you learn a lot about yourself. Like they make you work for everything. They defend really well. They're efficient. They're super well coached. They're clearly one of the best teams in the country. Assuming Arizona wins tonight, if they don't win tonight, maybe that takes some of the excitement off of Saturday. But it's still going to be a fun game, and you can make a case it's for the conference title, really, with the way the schedules and now that Tech doesn't have Toppin, and there's it's probably 4 teams in there, and Arizona still has to face Kansas and Iowa State. So, it's a big game for sure, and if Houston wins with the way their schedule's set up, I don't want to say they've locked up the conference, but it's probably pretty close.
Jason Scheer, Wildcat Authorities, we can see his byline. And, man, this is going to be a fun one tonight. I certainly hope it is. Actually, I hope it's a fun one. I hope it's closely contested. I like these ones that come down to the wire. BYU has liked to do the we'll come back late, and we'll make a game out of it at the very end of a lot of these games. And obviously came up short against Arizona, but it's going to be a very, very tough environment in Tucson this evening. Jason, thanks for your help, man. We'll talk to you again.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
There you go. Jason Scheer.